Veronica Jones, and I am here with my daughter, Alexis. And we often have these conversations, and they are really, really pretty good. So for a while now, we've been talking about coming together and just having conversations. A lot of times, what millennials have to say, Alexis is 25, is very different than what my generation may be thinking, or they just have a whole different vantage point about different things. So our latest conversation really sparked quite a lot of conversation, so we just kind of wanted to share some of it with you on camera. So I will start off. This one actually is about social justice and it being a form of worshiping God. So how this whole conversation came up is that I read an article, and it talked about that social justice was a form of worshiping God. And when you think about exactly what social justice is, what would you say social justice is?
When I think of social justice, I think of protesting, I think of speaking out, I think of fierceness, of stirring up trouble, kind of in a good way. And that's the whole point of a protest, is to make people uncomfortable, to stir things up so that there's room for change. So I think that's what I think of when I think social justice. And I think the responsibilities that we have as privileged people to help people who aren't as privileged as we are.
Yeah, so I would say, my definition is very similar. And I think, with this article that I shared with you, what interested me most about it was how kind of the other part of social justice that we don't readily think about, you alluded to it a little bit, in helping other people who are less fortunate to us. And, and that is one of the things I've always said, that my calling was to use my voice for those who don't have a voice. And when we look at in biblical terms, it tells us that we're supposed to help refugees and immigrants and, those who are most vulnerable. And those things are social justice. That's what it is. It's not just the power to the people march. It's also helping people, educating people, advocating on behalf of other people. And I think that's the part that I like the most. But here's what's interesting. This is what interested me most, I think, is that tie into worshiping God. Because, as you know, faith is very important to me. And lately, I've just had this whole thing about the term Christian. And I think, we've had some conversations about that too. And I even, a few days ago, I even was saying, just don't even call me a Christian, just because of things that have been done in the name of Christianity. And
you want to separate.
Yeah.
It makes the things that are going on make you want to separate from identifying from that as that group.
Right. Exactly. And fortunately for me, and we're going to talk a little bit more about this a little later though, my benchmark, I guess, for Christianity is Jesus, because if I left it up to the people,
it can't be.
It can't be. Yes. And so I think that's where I've really had this hard time with this term Christianity, just thrown out there. It's okay, if somebody were to ask me, are you a Christian? I almost want to say, well, depends. What does being a Christian mean to you?
Yeah.
What's your definition, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I kind of had the same kind of wanting to separate myself from the term Christian and from what church is today.
Yeah.
Because, and my thing, social justice wasn't what got me there. Well, I guess it kind of is, because once I started reading more into and thinking more about feminism and misogyny, all of those things are really unfortunately tied into a lot of traditional religion today, and Christianity too. So that was kind of where I kind of my line was wait a minute, I don't know that really works with, I fundamentally believe and these principles in the church doesn't exactly line up, or not exactly, but really it doesn't at all with those principles. Because nothing is going to be exact, and that's not what church is for. But I always feel like anytime I go, or if I'm hearing something or reading something about Christianity, I'm like, oh, but wait, but.
Yeah, it's like a lot of buts.
The more I just came to, there's more buts now than beliefs, unfortunately. So that's what I'm working through, and I think it ties into social justice, because the same principles of social justice, how we treat each other, is it's all tied in together.
Yeah, I agree. It is all tied in together. And, yesterday participated in the One Race movement, which is a movement of almost 250 churches coming together to pray and worship and to break down those strongholds of racism. So, and this is another issue, because when you think about it, racism, in my opinion, probably started through religion, right?
Yeah, religion has been and continues to be a main way that the racist system that we operate in, all of those things come from.
Yeah.
It's there, you could take the Bible and kind of make it fit what they want, and that's what I think that has happened.
Yeah, and they even talked about that yesterday, because they talked about it from from during slavery times and masters, and how they used Bible verses and to keep the slaves, quote, in check. And I think that is actually, one of my favorite movies is Birth of a Nation with Nat Turner, and then he was a preacher. And so they took him around and let him preach to different plantations. But when he really started reading it for himself, and then he really started preaching, not like from what they told him, but from what was revealed to him. And that's where that revolution came from. And I could so identify with that. It would be easy sometimes for me to throw Christianity away, but it's the relationship. So I am able, on most times, able to separate religion from my relationship with Jesus, which is completely different. Because when I think about what's done in the name of religion, it's often not what Jesus would do.
Yeah,
it's like totally the opposite.
Yeah, it's almost the exact opposite in a lot of cases. Just like what's going on in America right now with immigration and separating children from their families and from their parents, and these are babies. I mean, no human should be going through what they're putting people through. Doesn't matter, they're human beings, but there is, a special when it comes to dogs and children and, vulnerable people who are in vulnerable situations. And I think the entire way that we're dealing with it is the exact opposite of the way that Jesus would have dealt with it.
And that's the only thing that kind of keeps me going, because like I said, it is my relationship with Jesus. So when I really ask myself, sometimes people throw that WWJD, what would Jesus do around? Yeah, I think it gets tossed around rather lightly, honestly. What would you do about, what would Jesus do about immigration?
If Jesus was sitting in that policy room, if he was in that policy room while they were writing that.
Right, he would be like, bruh, for real?
Really?
Yeah. Do you know me?
Have you met me?
What do you always say? Have you ever met me?
Have you met me? Yeah, that's real.
But it is so real. And so I that's what I have to hone in on, just in terms of my own relationship. Is that because I know and what's been interesting as I evolve, I think, I've had this social justice piece. I've had this faith piece. And heretofore in my head, they have been separate pieces,
Okay.
right? Just separate things, not
Yeah.
really tied to each other.
Yeah.
But after reading this article, Social Justice is a Form of Worshiping God by Stephen Mattson, it really articulated what my soul knew. It's like I could feel it, but I would not have been able to explain it. I would not have been able to articulate it very well. But after reading that article, and then I have come to know of another organization called the And Campaign. I'm really excited about that one. The And Campaign, THEAND campaign.com. And what interests me about that one so much is it talks about taking biblical principles and social justice. And I'm like, okay, that is me. That is so me. And I am just really excited about that and just exploring, that organization and other organizations. And now that I can name it, shape it, more and more, I'm seeing more and more information that lines up with that and just makes my soul dance.
Good.
Yeah, so I'm really excited about that.
That is really exciting. I think it's definitely something that we need to start calling people out on.
Yeah.
Well, and I don't mean you as maybe. I don't mean every time you see someone who's Christian, whatever. Don't attack people.
Right. You
don't attack people.
We do not believe in attacking people.
Also, I think it's just about having a conversation, because I think a lot of people maybe haven't slowed down to really think about what it is that they are saying and doing versus what they say that they believe in. And I think a lot of people aren't really sitting with how those two things don't line up. And I think if they actually, because I don't think anyone out here, I choose to believe that majority of people are operating in good faith. I choose to believe that if someone supports something for whatever reason, that they really believe that that's the best
For them.
Yeah. So I don't want to take that away from anyone. I do think that we are all doing the best we can, but also you do have to really sit with yourself sometimes and be like, okay, this is what I believe, but am I operating that way? Is that evident in the way that I live my life? And would the people who know me best be able to say that that's the kind of person I am, that's my value? I have a manager, and we all know her value is honesty. We all know that when it comes to her, that's her number one thing.
Right.
So are your beliefs evident in a way that the people around you know where they stand when it comes know where you stand when it comes to certain things? And I think there's a missing piece.
Yeah, I think you really hit the nail on the head. And it's so funny that you say that, because just yesterday and the day before, one of my friends, Facebook friends, I don't know him that well, but he talked about, and he is African American male, so he talked about supporting Trump. He and the good things that he's done, how he's helped the economy and these other things. And honestly, I got ready to respond to that, and I said no, because that's, I don't like getting sucked into, I'm not here for an argument.
It's not fruitful. It's not productive.
It's not productive.
No one's mind is changed on Facebook.
It's not. It's just
It's not productive.
Right. But then I ended up, but I was really curious. And so I did. I went back and I asked, I said, I am curious. How do you reconcile all of these things that the president has done, calling women dogs, immigration, whatever you want to do, just all of
making fun of disabled people, grabbing women by their private
parts. And those were the exact
infinite. There are infinite examples.
Those are infinite examples, and those are the exact examples I use. I said, how do you reconcile that? And I know he's a Christian.
Yeah,
I know he's a Christian, and so my thought in asking him that, I really was asking because I wanted to understand.
Yeah.
Like in my head, I can't marry those two, but I wanted to understand. I respect him, right?
Yeah.
So I wanted to understand. So I asked, and the answer was that, because the president, the economy is doing well, he's in finance, and his clients are doing well, and so then so does economics trump character for you.
No pun intended, but
right. But that's exactly what I said. But because for me, yeah, I mean, it could be raining diamonds from the sky.
Yeah.
But I am more interested in who someone is and what they are first.
Yes.
Now, and yes, I'm loving that my 401k is doing what it's doing, loving that my investments are doing what they're doing. I'm loving that. However,
at what cost?
At what cost? Yes, at what cost? And so as we got into the conversation, another gentleman, I guess one of his Facebook friends, entered into the conversation, and honestly, I felt like he tried to drag me down a few rabbit holes, but I just was not.
Good for you.
Not going.
Yeah.
Just not going. And I really was asking the question for understanding, not to prove my point, not to say I'm right and you're wrong.
Yeah.
And my first thing I said was, before I even respond, we can agree to disagree. Bottom
what
line.
I'm here for.
Yes. And so the guy kept trying to make it about, I felt, being polite, or because he doesn't say things quite right, and I was like, character does not
see
equal
these eyes rolling.
character does not equal politeness.
It doesn't.
I mean,
there is nothing polite about character, because usually
it's hard. It's hard.
It's harder to make the decision that aligns with your character, because a lot of times you're going to have to go against people. You're gonna have to stand up for yourself. Civility is just it has its place in certain areas, but when they try to when people are whenever there's a shooting, and how they're like, okay, we need to do gun reform or whatever, but they're like, oh, civility, now is not the what do you mean? People died. Why are we talking about the words that we're using right now?
Yeah.
People are dying. That's kind of when I was over here the other day, Granny, we were watching that movie, and they just kept cussing, and it was just a whole lot going on, and it made her very uncomfortable because of the language and just what was going on. But my point in kind of discussing it with her was more but that's distracting you from the fact that this is what this woman is being mistreated. Regardless of which words are being used about it, it's the action that matters.
Right. Yeah, and I think we've gotten so,
and there's plenty of polite
bogged
racism.
down.
So.
There's a whole lot of polite racism. And then then it was coming back. Well, I guess you think people who have abortions, if they're polite, it's okay. If they're nice people, it's okay. And I'm like, you know what? She's my child.
Not polite.
So what I said was, you know what? I politely excused myself from this conversation. I'm like, you do know it's okay for us to agree to disagree, right?
Yeah.
And still, I think even the next day came back with something else. I'm like, I'm not going there with you.
Yeah.
I'm just not. So anyway, that was kind of that. But that just really that just happened to me, really just fit that story that you were talking about.
So one of the quotes that really stood out to me in the article that I really kind of latched onto, he says, Jesus' actions, feeding the hungry, helping the sick, defending the oppressed, criticizing religious leaders, check, chastising political empires, hello, pursuing justice, bridging social and cultural divides, seeking peace, and empowering others would be considered participating in social justice by today's standards. And that just stood out to me because I feel like it's ironically in such stark contrast to what we're living in today and what we're experiencing today. And I think it's just a good reminder to kind of really delve into who Jesus actually was and not what these power structures have kind of manipulated it to be. I think that's really important for all of us to really kind of sit with and make sure that we're living in our values and not just on Sunday or whatever day you worship, whatever you worship. Like, are you living those things on a day-to-day basis in your day-to-day interactions, in your day-to-day conversations, in the day-to-day times where you encounter people who need help?
What do you do then?
What are you doing?
Yeah. And I think that's I love that quote. And that was one I highlighted as well, because I think that one just really just speaks volumes. And I think, moving forward, those of you who are listening, think about that when you're talking about church and going to church and worshiping. Do you have this very, very narrow definition of what it means to worship, what it means to be a Christian? And I just really want to challenge you to just go a little bit deeper. And as Alexis said, go back to like who Jesus really, really was. And I think what we Westerners call Christianity actually looks nothing like Jesus.
And Jesus looks like those people y'all try to keep out, so.
You just had to throw that in there.
I did.
That's just what she does. So I hope you have enjoyed a view into our conversations that we have, and we will be sharing so much more with you. So we really hope you tune in, but let us know your thoughts about this one. Make sure you drop a comment in the comment sections. Tell us what you're thinking. And also, if there's an issue that you want to see discussed between a millennial and her mother, put that down in the comments too, so we can make note of that. Right?
Yep.
So what do you think?
I really enjoyed it. I like to talk, and I have a lot to say, so this is perfect.
Yeah, this is perfect. So we both like to talk. So anyway, thank you so much, and we look forward to talking with you again.
Okay.
Testing 1, 2, 3. Testing 1, testing 2, testing 3. Testing 1, testing 2, testing 3. Your turn. Test.
Testing 1.
Talk. I need to see what it sounds like. You gotta hear what it sounds like, so you know if you need to talk a little louder or what.
Testing 1, testing 2, testing 3.
That's all you got? This is gonna be hard if that's all you got.
I'm saving it.
Okay.